You fly out for Thanksgiving, heart full of hope, and arrive to an empty house. How do you make sense of being forgotten by the people who said they wanted you? I stood by the window, suitcase by my side, phone pressed to my ear. One ring.
Two.
Three. Voicemail. Again.
Hi, it's me.
I just landed, I said, trying to sound light. At Terminal B, like you said. Can't wait to see you all. No answer. I looked around the airport. Families hugging, children shrieking, people holding up signs. But for me, no Daniel. No Allison. No grandkids running toward me with sticky hands and toothy grins. I waited. I told myself it was traffic. Maybe their phones died. Maybe they were circling the terminal and couldn't find parking. But deep down, something whispered. Or maybe they're not coming at all. That voice had followed me since I booked the flight. Ever since I got Daniel's message. It had come out of nowhere, a voicemail, warm and eager. Fly out, Grandma. We want you here this year. Thanksgiving wouldn't be the same without you. I must have listened to it a dozen times. Each time, it filled me with this quiet ache.
Hope, maybe.
Or longing. They hadn't asked me to come in years. Always too busy, too tired, too far. But this time felt different. There was something in his voice. I wanted to believe it was real.
So I packed.
I folded up my late husband's scarf, the one that still smelled like cedar and mint. I baked shortbread cookies, his favorite, and Daniel's too, once upon a time. I picked the nicest cardigan I owned and left a sticky note on my fridge. Back home Sunday. Love, Maggie. But now, standing at the airport curb, my coat collar tugged by the wind, I wasn't sure anymore. I checked my phone. Nothing. No text, no missed call. I hesitated before calling again. Didn't want to seem desperate. But the silence started to hum in my ears, louder than the jets above. I pressed redial. Voicemail. Again. This time I didn't leave a message. Was it possible they forgot? That voicemail wasn't that long ago. Had something come up? An emergency? I stared at the families driving off together, laughing through open windows. My fingers tightened around the handle of my suitcase. I remembered how Daniel used to run into my arms after school, backpack half-zipped, hair messy from the playground. He'd tell me everything, who he sat next to, what he ate for lunch, how he'd saved a worm from drying out on the sidewalk. When did that boy stop calling? I sat down on a bench, my heart thumping for reasons I couldn't name yet. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. Just a hollow kind of wondering. The kind that creeps in when the silence stretches too long. I looked up and caught sight of a little girl holding her grandmother's hand. They were smiling, sharing a pretzel. That used to be me. Or it could have been. I reminded myself of the message. I wasn't crazy, he had said it. We want you here this year. So where were they? I took a deep breath and scrolled back to the voicemail, listening again. His voice, slightly slurred, but warm. A little too warm. Almost rehearsed. Something about it felt off this time. Was he drinking? The thought struck me like cold water. Daniel didn't drink much. At least, I didn't think he did. Then again, I hadn't really seen him, not in person, for nearly 3 years. Why now? Why invite me after all this time? Was it guilt? A mistake? I felt something inside me wobble, like a table with one leg too short. Could I have misunderstood? Or worse, had he never really meant it? And if that was true, then what was I doing here? That's when I realized this trip wasn't about comfort. It was about hope. A fragile kind. The kind you don't speak out loud because if it breaks, it takes part of you with it. But I had come anyway. I was here. And they weren't. What did that mean? And what was I supposed to do now? The wind was colder now, and the bench felt harder the longer I sat on it. My fingers itched to do something, call again, text, wave down a stranger, and ask what they would do. But I just sat there, holding my phone like it might warm up in my hand and suddenly ring with the sound of Daniel's voice. It didn't. I told myself to be patient. Maybe they got the terminals mixed up. Maybe I was supposed to wait at departures instead of arrivals. I stood, dragged my suitcase back inside, and found a spot near the baggage claim. Familiar faces surrounded me. People being found, being hugged. But I wasn't one of them. I stared at the doors, my heart jumping every time someone walked in who vaguely resembled Allison or Daniel. Every time it wasn't them. I refreshed my texts. Nothing. Open the call log. Still no return call. It had been nearly an hour. I sat down again, the buzz of suitcases and voices filling my ears like white noise. A thought began to form, quiet at first, but steady. What if they're not coming at all?
But no.
That voicemail. I played it again just to be sure. Just to hear those words. Fly out, Grandma. We want you here this year. I remembered how my hand had trembled a little the first time I heard it. I hadn't told anyone about the call. Not my neighbor Joan, not my sister Ruth, not even the pastor at Bible study. I didn't want to ruin it by saying it out loud. Like a snowflake in the sun. Too delicate to touch.
But now?
The warmth from those words had started to fade. Another 30 minutes passed. A janitor passed by, mopping near my bench. He glanced at me with a polite nod, then looked again. Probably wondering why this older woman had been sitting here alone so long. I smiled politely back. He didn't say anything, just moved on. But his look lingered in my mind. I finally texted Daniel. Hey, still at the airport. Everything okay? And waited. Still nothing. A voice on the loudspeaker announced a flight from Chicago. I watched more happy reunions play out like tiny plays in front of me. People crying, laughing, grabbing each other's faces. It made me ache in a place I hadn't touched in a long time. How long had it been since someone had waited for me? When Harold was alive, he'd wait for me at baggage claim with a big grin and a thermos of cocoa. He always brought the thermos. You never know when the world might need warming, he used to say. I touched the scarf tucked into my coat, his scarf. Still smelled like him. Faint but there. Another hour. Maybe more. Time was getting soft around the edges. Then, finally, a vibration in my hand. My phone lit up. Daniel. I answered so fast my heart skipped. Hey, Mom, he said, breathless. Sorry, we're just slammed.
Can you,
Uber over. My breath caught. For a second, I couldn't even speak. Slammed?
He knew I was flying in.
They invited me.
Didn't they?
Of course, I said, because what else could I say?
Sure.
I'll figure it out. He didn't ask how the flight was. Didn't ask if I needed help with my bags. Just said, cool. Thanks, and hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, even after the line went dead. An Uber. After 3 years. After that voicemail. That's what I got. I stood slowly, legs stiff, the ache in my chest settling in deeper than before. I opened the app and ordered a ride. As I waited, one question kept circling in my mind like a hawk overhead. If they wanted me there, why does it feel like I wasn't meant to come at all? The Uber arrived faster than I expected. A navy blue sedan rolled to a stop in front of the terminal, and a young man with a kind smile leaned over the passenger seat. You Maggie? He asked, pushing his sunglasses up into his curly hair. I nodded, pulling my suitcase behind me. I'm Jared. Need help with that? He offered, already reaching for my bag. No, I've got it. I said out of habit, though my arm ached. I slid into the back seat and shut the door with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than it should have. Jared glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Heading to Brighton Avenue, right? That's what they told me. I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral, like I had a plan. Like everything was going fine. But in my chest, something was unraveling. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the airport one last time. I had come with so much hope in that suitcase. So much quiet belief. Now, I wasn't sure what I was carrying anymore. You visiting family? Jared asked, filling the silence with friendly chatter. I hesitated. Something like that. He smiled again. Well, hope they're cooking something good. My mom used to make this marshmallow yam thing that could stop traffic. I smiled politely, but my stomach turned.
Cooking.
Laughter. Togetherness. All those warm things people expect this time of year. Was that still waiting for me? The city zipped by outside, but the hum of the tires couldn't drown out the voice in my head. Why didn't Daniel ask how I was? Why did he sound like I was just an errand to complete? We turned into a quiet neighborhood. Familiar, yet foreign. It had been years since I'd last seen their house, and even then, only in photos. My heart picked up pace as we pulled onto their street. But then,
I saw it.
the house was dark. No lights. No decorations. No cars in the driveway. Just an empty porch and drawn curtains. Maybe they went out. I checked the address. Double-checked it. This was the right place. Jared parked by the curb. You want me to wait a sec? Looks kinda shut down. I forced a smile. No, it's okay. They're probably out getting something for dinner. I stepped out, the cold nipping at my cheeks. Jared didn't drive away immediately. He lingered, watching in the mirror. I walked to the porch, dragging my suitcase up the steps. Knocked once. Then again. Nothing. I rang the doorbell. Still nothing. My chest tightened. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Again. I was about to try Allison when suddenly, the screen lit up. Incoming call. Allison. I answered quickly. Allison?
Hi.
She cut me off. Oh, you actually came? Her voice wasn't surprised in the way people get when they're excited. It was flat. Almost annoyed.
Yes.
I just arrived, I said, blinking at the closed door in front of me. A pause. Then she sighed. I told him to cancel that message. He left it after a few drinks. I didn't think you'd actually book a flight. Her voice drifted like static. Distant. Casual. As if I'd RSVP'd to the wrong party. I'm at your house, Allison, I said quietly. The lights are off. We're not home, she replied, like it was obvious. We're at the cabin. Took the kids up yesterday. My throat closed, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. So, you're not coming back tonight?
No.
Daniel figured you'd never actually show up. It was just a moment of guilt, I guess. He didn't think she stopped herself. Anyway,
Gotta go.
we're about to eat. She hung up before I could say a word. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, hand trembling slightly. Behind me, Jared rolled down his window, just a little. Everything okay, ma'am? I turned, swallowing hard. Change of plans, I said softly. They're not home.
He didn't say anything.
Just nodded like he understood more than I was willing to admit. So the invitation wasn't real. Not really. It was never about seeing me. It was about easing his conscience. A careless message, sent on a wave of liquor and forgotten like a tossed receipt. And now here I was, standing on a dark porch with a suitcase full of cookies and no one to eat them. What was I supposed to do next? Where do you go when the people who invited you never wanted you to come at all? I stood there for another full minute after Allison hung up, as if the silence itself might give me some kind of explanation. But all I got was the sound of wind rattling the dead leaves across the porch floor. The truth had been seeping in since the airport, slow like water under a door. But now it flooded through me all at once. They didn't forget. They didn't get stuck in traffic. They just never meant for me to come. I had flown across the country for a seat that didn't exist. Not at the table, not in their plans, not even in their thoughts. The door in front of me, the same one Daniel had walked through as a boy, now felt like it belonged to strangers. I turned back, toward the curb. Jared was still there, idling quietly, his face a soft question behind the windshield. I lifted my suitcase and walked back down the steps, trying to keep my chin high, though I could feel my heart sinking lower by the second. He leaned out the window. Didn't go as planned? No, I said. Not quite. He didn't press. Just popped the trunk again and got out to help with my bag. You want to go somewhere? He asked gently. Hotel?
Airport.
I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out at first. I didn't want to go back to the airport. And the idea of sitting in a beige hotel room watching reruns while families gathered around turkeys felt worse than staying on that porch. I finally said, just drive for a bit. I'll figure it out. He nodded, like this wasn't the first time he'd picked someone up who didn't know where they were going. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the house one last time. Dark, still, and hollow. Not even a wreath on the door. In that moment, I felt something crack open. A space I didn't know had been sealed shut for years. I thought about all the times I gave them the benefit of the doubt. All the holidays they were too busy. The birthdays forgotten. The rushed calls, the empty promises. But now, I saw it clearly. It wasn't just that they hadn't made room for me. They had made sure there wasn't one. The voicemail hadn't been an invitation. It was a mistake. A moment of guilt Daniel probably didn't even remember clearly. A careless gesture I'd built my hopes around. A ghost of affection dressed up like love. I leaned my head against the cold window and closed my eyes. I remembered the way Harold used to look at me on Thanksgiving morning, flour on his nose, apron tied wrong, swearing he could make the best pumpkin pie if I just trusted him with the cinnamon. We used to host, once upon a time. Big tables, loud stories, laughter that echoed into the next morning. Back then, the house had been full. Back then, I had been seen. Jared's voice broke through my thoughts. "You hungry?" I blinked, caught off guard. "A little." He pointed to a small diner up ahead. "This place stays open for the holiday. Family owned. Good people." I hesitated. He added, "They won't mind if you're not on the guest list." I let out a small laugh, the first real one in hours, and nodded. As he pulled into the parking lot, I realized something strange. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. Just done. Done waiting for people who saw me as a leftover. Done excusing the silence. Done folding myself smaller to fit into their shrinking version of family. Maybe I'd been waiting for this moment all along. The one where I stopped asking why they didn't want me and started asking why I still wanted them to. Jared put the car in park and looked at me. "You okay?" I met his eyes in the mirror. "No," I said honestly, "but I think I will be." And I meant it. I stepped out of the car and into something I hadn't felt in years. Not comfort. Not yet. But clarity. And for the first time that day, I stopped wondering where I was supposed to be and started wondering what might happen if I just walked into somewhere new. I didn't go into the diner right away. Jared had parked, engine quiet, music low, some old jazz tune playing softly through the speakers. He hadn't said anything else since I told him I wasn't okay. Maybe he knew some silences weren't meant to be filled. "I think I'll sit out here a minute," I said gently. He nodded, not pushing. "Take your time. I've got another pickup nearby, but I'll swing back in a little." "You good here?" "Yeah," I lied. "Thank you, Jared." He gave a small wave like he wasn't saying goodbye, just see you soon, and pulled out of the lot. And just like that, I was alone again. The curb was cracked and uneven, lined with crunchy leaves and an old bench with peeling paint. I sat down, my suitcase beside me, my coat tugged tight around my chest. A gust of wind carried the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon from the diner's kitchen vents, and it hit me so fast, so sharp I nearly choked on it. I'd baked for them. I'd packed their favorites in small tins, peanut brittle, the lemon squares Daniel used to sneak before dinner. They were still in my bag, untouched. I should have known better. But a part of me, the stubborn, quiet part that still remembered bedtime stories and baby laughter, had wanted to believe I still mattered. And now here I was, sitting on a sidewalk I didn't recognize, with no plan, no family, and no place to go. A woman passed by with a grocery bag and glanced at me. Not in a cruel way, more in that way people look when they're trying not to stare. I must have looked like a ghost. A lady too old to be traveling alone. Too still to be confident. Too quiet to be okay.
I pulled out my phone again. Not to call.
I didn't have anyone else to call. I just stared at the screen, like maybe it would light up on its own with some kind of apology, some message that made it all less cruel. There was nothing. Just that old voicemail from Daniel, still saved. I hit play. "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here this year." This time, I didn't cry. I just listened. Listened to the lie I'd chosen to believe. To the slurred edges of his voice, the way it almost sounded like love. I hovered over the delete button for a long moment. And then I pressed it. The screen went dark. The message vanished. And something in me loosened, just a little. Not healed. Not whole. But no longer holding on to something that never held me back. I looked down at my suitcase. The corner was scuffed from the airport. One of the cookie tins had started to rattle loose.
What now?
I wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Going back would feel too much like quitting, like letting them define how this day would end. But staying here, in this nowhere place, on this broken bench, wasn't living either. Then I heard a soft honk. I looked up and saw a familiar car pulling into the lot again. Jared. He rolled down the window. Didn't like the bench, huh? I stood slowly, brushing off my coat. It's not the bench's fault, I said. Just not quite the Thanksgiving I pictured. He smiled. That diner's still open. Smells amazing, by the way. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not exactly dressed for company. He shrugged. They're the kind of people who care more about stories than sweaters. Stories. That word hung in the air like a key. It had been so long since anyone wanted to hear mine. I looked back at the diner. Warm light glowed through the windows. Inside, I saw a few families, some laughter, plates being passed around.
It wasn't fancy.
It wasn't planned, but it was open. Maybe that was enough. Jared stepped out and opened the passenger door.
Come on.
Worst case, you get pie. I smiled. And best case, you find something better than what you came for. I hesitated. Then I stood straighter, lifted my suitcase, and walked toward the door, toward something unknown, but real. And in that moment, for the first time all day, I felt like I was moving forward, not waiting for someone to show up. The bell above the diner door jingled as I stepped inside, my suitcase trailing behind me like an old memory. Warmth wrapped around me instantly, not just the heat from the ovens, but the kind that comes from voices talking over each other, from the smell of butter and spice, from people who aren't pretending to be happy, they just are. It was small, cozy, the kind of place where the booths were a little too tight and the lights were a little too yellow, but it felt real. Honest. The walls were lined with framed photos and mismatched signs. A chalkboard menu sat behind the counter, written in curly, excited handwriting. Thanksgiving special, served until we run out. Jared gave me a small nudge on the elbow.
Told you.
Before I could even respond, a woman behind the counter spotted us. She was in her 60s, maybe, but walked like she had energy to spare. Curly gray hair pinned up in a loose bun, cranberry-colored apron dusted with flour. Well, she called out, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You bringing me another stray, Jared? Just the one, he said with a grin. This is Maggie. She stepped around the counter and came right up to me. Maggie. That's a good name. I'm Olivia. Welcome. I started to explain, to make some excuse about not meaning to stay, about how I was just passing through, but she waved her hand like she already knew. Let me guess. The people you were supposed to see forgot how lucky they are? I blinked, stunned. She smiled softer now. You wouldn't be the first. Jared glanced at his phone. I've got to run. You good? I looked at him. Really looked. This young man who'd waited, checked in, brought me here when he didn't have to. I reached out and touched his arm lightly. Thank you, I said, for not leaving me on that curb. He smiled. Just doing what my grandma would have wanted. And with that, he disappeared back into the night. I turned back to Olivia, unsure what to say next. Come on, she said, taking my suitcase and rolling it behind the counter without asking. You're sitting with us. With who? She nodded toward a table near the kitchen. 3 servers, 2 little kids, and what looked like the cook himself were crowded around a table covered in half-eaten pies and roast turkey. That's my family, blood or otherwise. Some work here, some just never left. I don't want to intrude, I said, still frozen halfway between the door and the counter. She looked me dead in the eye. You're not. You're what's been missing. She meant it. I could feel it. And so I followed her. The table scooted over to make space. A little girl with curly hair handed me a crayon and a paper placemat before I even sat down. You can draw turkeys too, she said solemnly, but only if you trace your hand first. I smiled and did exactly as she said. Dinner was loud, messy, and filled with stories. Olivia passed me mashed potatoes like I'd always been part of the group. The cook, George, told a joke so bad it made the entire table groan. Someone spilled cranberry sauce. Someone else passed around photos from an old vacation and made fun of everyone's hair. And in the middle of it, I realized something. No one here cared why I was alone. They just saw that I was here, and they made room. As the meal went on, the kids asked me to tell them a story. Olivia leaned in. She looks like she's got a few, doesn't she? I hesitated, then began just a small one, about the Thanksgiving Harold accidentally served salt instead of sugar in the pie. It made the little girl giggle so hard, she snorted into her juice. And something inside me clicked. Not pain. Not regret. Something new. Olivia grinned.
See?
You've got more to give than your family could ever see. I looked around the table, at the hands reaching for more rolls, at the crumbs and the laughter, at the place I never planned to find. And for the first time all day, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt seen. What if this was Thanksgiving all along? Not the picture I built in my head, but this. A table that didn't need me to be perfect, just present. What else had I missed by always looking in the wrong direction? That night, I lay on the pull-out couch in Olivia's office above the diner. She'd offered it without hesitation, just tossed me a set of flannel pajamas, brewed chamomile tea, and said, "You can leave in the morning or not. Up to you." The couch creaked when I moved, but the blankets were soft, and the hum of conversation from downstairs had faded into a cozy silence. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows of passing cars moving across it like slow waves. My suitcase sat in the corner, unopened since dinner. The cookies still inside. Untouched. But I didn't mind anymore. There was something new resting in the quiet, not disappointment, not anger. Just stillness. A kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Like for once, I wasn't waiting for someone to remember me. I thought of the table downstairs. The spilled gravy. The way the kids had begged me to tell just one more story. The way Olivia had clapped when I finished. I thought about how they didn't ask what I was doing there, only if I wanted more pie. And I realized something simple. Something I should have known a long time ago. I am not hard to love. I reached for my phone. The same phone I'd stared at all day, waiting for it to ring, waiting for it to explain something that never made sense. I didn't want to wait anymore. So I opened the recorder. I didn't write anything down. I didn't rehearse. I just spoke. Slowly. Carefully. From the quiet place inside me that had once held so much hope. "Hey, Daniel. I waited. I hoped. I forgave before you even asked me to. I flew across the country because you said you wanted me there. And for a while I believed it." My throat caught, but I kept going. But this year, I sat at a table where I was seen. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. Just because I mattered. I paused. That's Thanksgiving. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't leave space for apologies or explanations. Just truth. Then I pressed send. The message zipped off into the digital void, and I set the phone down beside me, screen face down. I didn't want to know if he'd listen. That wasn't the point. This wasn't for him. It was for me. Because the truth was, I didn't need to be angry. I didn't need to be bitter. I didn't need to perform some grand act of cutting ties or reclaiming power. I just needed to stop hoping for something that wasn't there. And in that act, that small recording, that quiet truth, I took something back. My voice. My peace. My place at the table. Not the one I'd chased for years, but the one I'd found when I finally stopped chasing. I turned off the light and pulled the blanket up around my shoulders. Somewhere downstairs, someone laughed. A deep, belly laugh that echoed through the floorboards and made the old building feel alive. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I could rest. But something else stirred too. What if this wasn't the end of the story? What if this was just the beginning? The morning sunlight poured through the diner windows like melted butter.
Warm. Slow.
Comforting. It spilled across the linoleum floor and crept up the legs of the chairs, touching everything like a quiet blessing. I sat by the window with a mug of coffee between my hands, the kind served in thick, chipped ceramic cups that have stories baked into their glaze. Olivia bustled behind the counter, shouting to the cook and wiping down trays at the same time. She looked over at me and grinned. Sleep okay? I nodded. Better than I have in years. And I meant it. Something had shifted overnight. I wasn't sure when exactly. Maybe in that moment I hit send. Or maybe when Olivia handed me that extra blanket without asking questions. But the ache in my chest, it wasn't gone. Not completely. It just didn't feel so heavy anymore. After breakfast, I pulled out my suitcase from the office and started to zip it closed. You leaving today? Olivia asked, gently. I paused, my hand on the zipper. I was thinking about staying a little longer, if that's all right. Her smile bloomed like sunrise. You better. We got a town full of folks who need stories. Especially the little ones at the library. Miss Kate, she's in charge over there. Always says she wishes someone would come read to them like the old days. A beat. Think you're up for it? I looked out the window. Across the street, two kids chased each other in front of the library steps, their laughter echoing down the block. I took a breath and nodded.
Yes.
I think I am. Later that week, I stood in front of a group of second graders in the reading corner of the town library. I was nervous, more than I expected, but as soon as I opened the book and began to read, they leaned in. Every child, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. They listened like it mattered. And something inside me, something old and small and quietly waiting, bloomed. Week after week, I returned. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I had something to give. And finally, someone saw it. I wasn't just Grandma. I was Maggie, the woman who flew across the country and landed somewhere better than expected. I never heard back from Daniel. Not a text. Not a call. Maybe he listened to the message, maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter anymore. That part of the story had closed. And something else had begun. One afternoon, while reading a story about a woman who got lost and found herself in the woods, a little girl raised her hand and asked, "Is this a true story?" I smiled. Maybe. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that could be true. She tilted her head. Did she find her way home? I paused, then said, "She found something better." The girl beamed. And in that moment I knew I wasn't lost anymore.